Arena's going away. Or maybe it's gone away by the time this is uploaded. It's come and gone 3 times, and the first time it arrived, I think most of us thought it was one of the best game modes League has ever made, especially after a drought of good alternative game modes. But it was new and shiny then, and perhaps our feelings about it were just marveling at its novelty, and we'd latch onto anything to get us away from Summoner's Rift. Its welcome was short-lived, but it would eventually come back a second time, and we, well, at least I was still addicted to it. They added a few more augments, some of which were so outrageously broken that they got removed in a week, added a revive mechanic that wasn't well received by everyone but did make fights a bit more engaging, and so the usual tank meta too strong comments would keep popping up, the game mode was still excellent to me. Then came the third Arena iteration. Instead of 2v2v2v2, it became 2v2v2v2v2v2v2v2, and lets more players in on the fun at once, at maybe the cost of some planning ahead and counter building that Arena once had, making your matchups a little more random over the course of a game. Speaking of which, it also added the item anvils to get a random item at a slightly cheaper cost, the random stat anvils to buy instead of just juices, and the powerful items exclusive to the RNG prismatic anvil. This terrified me, as I thought the increased player count and powerful RNG items would lead this to be a much more random and much less skillful game mode. It felt like maybe it would become closer to teamfight tactics, and I'm definitely allergic to the heavy RNG involvement in TFT. I'm much more of a mechabellum kind of auto-battler enjoyer. But even so, when we all gave the third Arena iteration a try, it was still the best game mode, though I guess it doesn't have much competition. Like, yeah, I kinda like Summoner's Rift, just as I kinda like modern Yu-Gi-Oh! But an old League boomer like me sometimes wishes I could just chill, farm, and play a slower League, instead of being run down by Dashing McDash's Fast and his trusty Lilia every game. Which makes you wonder why we'd play Arena. Well, it's simply true that League is not the same as it was before. 2 dashes on a single champion used to be an absolute premium, but now I'd call it rather common, where we used to have exactly 1 flat armor penetration item in the game that no one upgraded into Yomos. Because why would you? We now have several lethality items that also have powerful passive abilities. There's no shortage of executes, percentage health damage, missing health damage, and so on and so on. The point is, the power and mobility creep have gone insane, but I'm not complaining right now. Yes, it's annoying to just be farming your lane and then 2 dudes dash out and stun you for 30 seconds and kill you in only 0.5 of them, because now you're even more behind and all you wanted to do was have a nice lunch break instead of farming from behind while your team calls you every disease and slur in the world. But in Arena, what farm? Arena gets rid of the most egregious thing in modern League of Legends in my opinion, which is snowballing. I can't lose CS when I die, there are no creeps. I can't lose tower, I can't be the reason the enemy gets Baron. I'm not about to give up 1000 gold of shutdown money because that doesn't exist. And best of all, players only get 250 gold per round if they kill at least 1 opponent. As a result, you're mostly on the same power level as everyone else in the lobby, outside of certain mechanics. You may fall behind in health, but it isn't truly over until it's over, so no one's often rushing to surrender. This third iteration of Arena has been its longest, and indeed, raising the playing count did make counter building less of a thing, but I don't think that's enough to make it a bad game mode, far from it. The added stat anvils are honestly a dosage of RNG I can decently agree with in practice, and yes, sometimes you'll lose a game because some guy got Omnisoul and Dragonheart early on, but it doesn't feel entirely hopeless, and if it is, it doesn't last as long as SR, and you can just requeue. But even so, the added RNG aspects including the higher player count did make it a little more brain dead of a mode, which is going to be up the alley of quite a few players, and just about fine by me. Tanks were once again quite strong, and then we have... oh no, Riot tried to fix it. Halfway into third Arena's lifespan, Riot came in with new augments and prismatics. These had fun things like bizarre stat increases and percentage max HP true damage. In fact, there were a lot of percentage items and augments added, clearly as a response to the dominance of juggernauts and tanks, but where I took issue is that these were locked behind prismatics and augments, making counter building a bit randomized rather than tactical, and using this to justify their huge power. I've got to say, I liked Arena a bit less after the update, and even if I didn't say much about it, my play rate clearly dwindled afterwards. But even with this, it's still such a good game mode. The base idea is fantastic, and I think with refining it the right way, it could be even better. In the earliest versions of Arena, the Arena stat buff gave you stacking tenacity to help combat spam stuns when everyone can get cooldowns bizarrely low. This made sense, and though a somewhat invisible buff, made fighting crowd control much more enjoyable. The second Arena chose to replace this with a more visible buff and introduced the combo breaker mechanic, where if you are immobilized for 5 out of the last 7 seconds, you'll be granted total CC immunity for 2 seconds. This is an example of a bad change. For one, 5 out of 7 seconds is a long time. Champions die in 2 seconds in Arena, usually fewer in Summoner's Rift, so 5 is basically only helping out tanky champions. And not only that, but enemies that space their CC out ever so slightly won't trigger it and so get the full value out of their crowd controls essentially. And for 2 seconds, you usually spend the first 1 to 1.5 seconds figuring out that Combo Breaker actually happened for once, and thereby waste the rest just to get stunned again. And as the stunner, you just feel totally invalidated for 2 whole seconds. I don't think it's fun either way. It can even screw you over if you're trying to escape on a blast cone the moment you're free from the next stun, since that CC immunity also prevents knockback from the blast cone. I think it's fine if the tenacity buff is invisible. I'd prefer it from both players' perspectives when talking about crowd control spam. Combo Breaker is clearly supposed to be for when crowd control gets totally out of control, like a fresh queue having way too much ability haste. But it's just not good at solving the issue either, and either a new solution should be found for next time or just roll it back to the previous. QSS and purchase tenacity do exist. It's clearly not enough to make me hate Arena or deem it unplayable, which speaks volumes to the base game mode's quality. I would also love to play it without fear it's suddenly going to disappear, so really, it should be a permanent game mode. Even if I don't particularly like the update to Arena, it clearly shows that Riot is at least capable of patching Arena and SR at the same time. Having the option to play Arena is more likely to keep a player like me playing League than Summoner's Rift is, and I always find that after many Arena games, I slowly start to want to come back to that slower, tactical gameplay we associate with Summoner's Rift. Then crawl back to Arena 2 matches later. What I'm saying is, not all of us want to stick around for Summoner's Rift. ARAM does get old at some point, and Arena is just fresh enough and casual enough for me to always consider playing League. Then again, maybe they don't need to keep Arena, since I'd probably have to keep a League around regardless. Summoner's Rift is the only MOBA worth putting time into. There's no real competition. Oh, hello. Thanks for watching. Let's hope Arena comes back soon, and if it stays, that's even better. But looking on the bright side, I have many stupid ideas for League content, as well as bringing back a series or two that maybe you'll want to stick around for. So any likes and subscriptions are appreciated as always. I know Arena's not absolutely for everyone, so I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and here's a special thanks to the YouTube members. Shoutouts to AJBeat91, Warsquid, Ultimate Ground, Cryo's Dad, Gentleman Zeta, Lunar Eagle 1996, 53rd Alabama Booty Obi-Wan Kenobi, N Era, AC Immortal, Mr. Noodle, Bass1378, Gilbert Morals, Tierman Karanfil, Luxius, Dario Castro, Entity 9, Overseer, and Luca, Thomas Ruiz, and Recruiter. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel.